was robbed, and I thought I might die. I was thinking of you.
Let's try that again. Hey, everybody. My name is Daniel Unmanageable, and welcome to the 10th episode of Hard Knox Talks. I am so happy that this is happening as well as it is. I have a brand new chair that I am very excited about. It was donated to the show by an anonymous donor who is very supportive of the cause. So, tonight's guest has lived a hell of a life, both in active addiction and now recovery. Everything from broken homes to rock and roll to world traveler to Hard Knox Talks. To tell his story and spread a little hope, here he is, Christofur Real. You are muted because I am still muting you.
How's
I am
that?
not doing it. Way better.
How are you doing?
I'm doing terrible with the mute button. I will tell you that.
All right. Happy 10th episode. That's fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah. And I'm so glad that we have you here to share it with.
I'm so glad to be here. Yeah.
So let's get started.
Sure.
Now, when we were talking, we spoke of kind of a rocky road for you in as far as family life goes in your early years. You did some jumping around. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I did some jumping around. My parents split up when I was pretty young, the kindergarten, I think, grade 1, maybe a little bit before that. And then, yeah, so kind of bounced back and forth between mom and dad and my dad's parents, my grandparents. And that went on till about the middle of grade 3 before I finally went to live with my grandparents permanently. So, and then had a good streak of stability for a few years after that. And then around about grade 8, my grandparents split up. So, yeah, so a couple interesting, detours in life in the early days for sure.
Yeah, no kidding. So how was that for school for you? You must have jumped around quite a bit.
Jumped around, yeah. If I'm remembering correctly, I think like when I was in kindergarten, I went to 4 different kindergartens in like 3 different towns, if I'm not mistaken. So tough to get a footing right at the very beginning of my academic career, but as I say, by the middle of grade 3, I moved in with my grandparents, and it was pretty stable after that for a while.
So was that weird for you? Like when the instability stopped and you found some roots, did that take some time for you to start to feel as though this was going to be how life is going to be for a while?
No, I don't think so. I think I assumed that was how it was going to be. I'd lived with my grandparents for stretches before that, and loved it. I mean, they were wonderful people. I know that when I went back to live with them, that's what I really wanted to do. So once I got there, it was almost more of a mission accomplished kind of.
Great sigh of relief.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, right on, man. So what kind of friends did you develop once you started to put roots down? Like what sort of demographic did you gravitate to?
When I was younger, I don't know. I've never really had a lot of friends, and partly because I did a lot of jumping around in those early days, right? I didn't really develop those connections, and especially like most of my childhood was spent in Weyburn, Saskatchewan, which is a small community where cliques and peer groups develop really early. So I didn't really have a chance to associate myself with any of them. My types of friends, though, tended to be, the intellectual types, the smart kids, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So you did really
the brains, we were called, right?
So you did well in school then.
Once I moved back in with my grandparents in grade 3, I did exceedingly well in school until they split up. I did exceedingly well in everything until they split up. So I was involved in soccer and tennis and drama club and all that, and did really well in all of them. And then after they split up, it kind of went askew for a while. So.
Okay. And how old were you when that happened?
So I would have been in grade 8 when that happened.
Okay. And like what kind of things started happening? Like what were you getting into?
Nothing. So I didn't really get into anything.
What did you get out of?
I know that's a lot of people's stories. Really what happened to me is that I just became really kind of withdrawn from life. And I mean, there was a certain anger that I couldn't get out. Now, as coincidence would happen, this was around the same time like that bands like Pearl Jam and Nirvana were emerging, and kind of expressing what I was feeling but couldn't express myself through their lyrics and through their sound, right? So I kind of naturally gravitated towards that, and that was my salvation, right? So I wasn't a super popular kid. I didn't have a very stable home life anymore. I didn't have a lot going on, but I had music, right? So
is that around the time you started, like you picked up a guitar?
No, that was a couple years later. I just was talking with my dad on the phone one night and just kind of mentioned how I might like to learn guitar one day. And he immediately said, I've got a spare guitar in storage I don't use. It's yours. And so within a couple of weeks, I had that in my hands, and it didn't really leave my hands for the next 5 years.
Wow. So that got you through some things then.
It absolutely did. Yeah. It's, like the junior high years were tough. The high school years were tough, but School was tough, but I could go home and have a guitar in my hand.
What made it tough? Why was it tough?
I don't have a good answer for that.
No.
It was just, I think just because, I wasn't what you consider a popular kid, didn't have a lot of friends. Just wasn't really into, like I said, after my grandparents split up, I stopped being engaged in all these extracurricular activities that I was doing before. So didn't really build any pure relationships that way either. I think that's mainly why I didn't really have a thing in high school. So, I played guitar, but no one really knew that until close to graduation. But so, yeah.
So, when did substances start entering the picture for you?
Really late. So, all through, I think through high school, I think I got drunk in high school once, before a school dance. And that was it. And I never saw a drug until after high school grad. Where it really happened is my first band that I started out of high school. Started playing around, started getting some pretty good gigs, and as any musician will tell you, every gig you play, or almost every gig you play, booze is part of your pay. And sometimes it's your only pay, right? So we played a lot of shows where it's like, we can't give you any money, but you have an unlimited bar tab. Well, if that was my pay, then I was gonna get paid, right? So, or if I got 10 drink tickets, I wasn't using 9. I would have to use the 10 because that was my compensation. And that's really where it started.
Wow. So tell us about some of the bands you played with.
So just coming out of high school, I had a high school punk band. We called ourselves Sour Planet, and we did Bad Religion and Rancid covers, and some Chris originals. And
so you were writing music by this time?
I was, yeah.
Okay.
I was. So we didn't play much because we weren't of age, right? But we did the occasional, dance at the Elks Hall, or
cool.
Played a telethon once, and things like that.
Yeah. So sorry, were you going to say something?
Nope, go ahead.
Okay. So when you started drinking, you were going into nightclubs. It was everywhere. Was it a gradual thing for you, or once you started being compensated, it sort of took off right away, or what does that look like for you?
Yeah. So I think what really happened was, I've always been a painfully shy person. For whatever reason, I can get on stage and talk to hundreds or thousands of people with a microphone in front of my face. But as soon as I'm in a situation like this, or a one-on-one, or a group of a few, I start. It's really uncomfortable for me. But I figured out a few beers, and oh my God, I can talk to people now. And I can talk to girls now. All right, I can, right? I'm not nervous and awkward around them, and that I think that's where it all sort of started. Where it's okay, as long as I stay drunk, I can stay, flirty and do some PR and all that stuff that's kind of expected of you when you're in that kind of position. And then it just kind of snowballed from there.
Wow. So looking back now, what were some of the red flags? I mean, that you didn't necessarily notice at the time, but looking back, what do you think was the tipping point for you?
Oh boy. So years later, because at first it's fun, right? If it wasn't, no one would drink or do a drug twice, right? Yeah. So at first they sort of work for you. They work for what you want to do. So I had, I would say there were a couple 3 years where it was more party than problem, right? But of course, what always happens is eventually it becomes more problem than party. and then eventually becomes all problem and no party.
Party's over.
Party's over. So if I were to, I get asked that a lot from people who are seeking my help, and they ask when did you know? And I have to answer, I didn't in real time. I only can see it in retrospect what the red flags were. The example I give is where I can see now it was becoming more problem than party is one night I was at a house party, and drugs had entered my life in a big way by this point. This is like mid 2000s. And I remember flirting with a girl, and the girl asked if I had any blow. And with the crowd I was running with in those days, that was a pretty common situation to find myself in. And I usually did have it. And I would always say, yeah, I sure do. Let's sneak out to your car, or let's find some place to do that. And this one night I got asked, and I had some, and I said no. And why did I say no? Because I wanted it for myself, right? Up to that point, I was telling myself that I was drinking and doing E and doing blow to loosen myself up, to be able to talk to people, to be able to flirt, and that night I chose, and pardon my language, but for the first time in my life, I chose getting more fucked up over getting fucked, right? And from that point on, that I made that decision more and more until that was the only decision I was making.
Yeah. So towards the end of your musical career back then, you played with a band called Bilf, correct?
Yes, that's right.
And you had a pretty good friend in there, someone that was able to sort of hold you accountable. How did things go for you when that ended?
So when that band ended, so we played our last show on New Year's Eve 2007 going into 2008. And you're right. So my best friend, my adopted big brother.
And you're still friends to this day, correct?
Still my very best friend. Yeah. And because he was in that band, and was always sort of watching out for me. I mean, I still went off the rails, literally and figuratively, a lot, but not usually for shows, right? So once that band disbanded and I wasn't seeing him as much anymore, that's when I sort of started taking my really deep dive into the darkness that would come in the next couple of years.
Okay. So when that ended for you, how long was it until it wasn't about drinking at night or drinking at the party, until it was, I need a drink when I wake up. I need a drink to wake up.
Yeah. So shortly after that band disbanded, so now for the first time in my adult life, I don't have a music project, right? So that gave me a lot more time to kind of get messed up. And then what happened shortly after that was I happened to enter in a relationship with a girl who could keep up with me. I'll put it that way. So all my previous relationships were always with a girl who frowned upon that side of my life, right? So I would either have to deny it outright or hide it, and so could only indulge occasionally, right? So then I think this is a pretty common story for people, is they seek out people that will validate their dysfunction.
I have a similar story. So.
Right, and I'm sure lots do. So rather than having to, maybe conceal the 8-ball in my pocket and just sneak out every now and again, now I have this girl that's like, let's go get an 8-ball, right? Let's drink every night of the week, right? So that that certainly accelerated things. And it was shortly after that, I would, that waking up and pouring myself a glass of rye became my lifestyle.
Yeah. When we were talking, you said it came to a point where when your weekends would come, you would have to bounce around because not one group of friends could keep up.
So right. So and that was when I was still going out and drinking. A Friday night, I'd go out with a group of a few people, and everyone would get absolutely obliterated. And then the next day, those people would take a breather, whereas I had to go again. And so I had to call up a different group of people, and then we'd go out on Saturday night and do the same thing. And then on Sunday, those people don't want to go. So you hook up with some people that work at bars and go to an industry night on a Sunday night, or it just became a constant thing for me.
Mm-hmm. And then 2007 rolls around. What started happening in 2007?
Well, and I mentioned that when we spoke earlier, I mentioned that year because that's the year when I look back that's where I see that my life went, where my substance issues went from party to problem. Not that there weren't problems before that, there were. But the good times, a case could be made, still outweighed the bad. Around 2007 is just where it seemed to become, where it just started taking a really dark turn.
So were you still holding down a job at this point?
Still, oh yeah. Yeah, still holding down a job. I was pretty highly functioning user for sure.
Mm-hmm. But like I understand that some mental health challenges started coming to the surface, and that's where your drinking got really heavy, right?
Yeah, and again, in retrospect, that happened, right? I don't want to jump too far ahead in the story and mess up the timeline here, but I was the asshole that denied that depression and anxiety were even things, right? Even then, and that in retrospect, I can see that's the period of my life when it really started affecting me detrimentally. But I would have been the guy that said, life sucks, get a helmet, right? Mm-hmm. Depression and anxiety, that's words people use to get out of work. That's literally what I thought. And I thought that until the day that those diseases almost killed me. Mm-hmm. It took ending up in the hospital to accept that those were real issues. So
you started missing work more and more, correct?
Yeah, taking a lot more sick days, inventing legitimate health problems that didn't exist, because I just wanted to drink more. I hate that that's what it was, but that's what it was. Is I just that was just it. The booze controlled my life. Simple as that.
Tell us about the day you went to 2 liquor stores.
So that's 2011. So over the summer of 2011 is what I describe as my final descent. It's where everything started getting very dark very fast. I was drinking so much. I was drinking only to pass out. I wasn't trying at first to do any damage to myself, but I still understood that I was. Like, I would say to myself things like, one of these days I'm going to drink so much and pass out and I'm not going to wake up. And then in September of that year, that changed from a fantasy to a plan. I picked a weekend and I circled it mentally on my calendar, and it was a 3-day weekend from work, and that was gonna be the weekend that I was gonna drink enough finally to not wake up. And so it's tough. So I got off work. I had the Friday off, so I got off work on Thursday night. It was a payday. I went and cashed my check at Money Marks. I didn't have a bank account. I didn't have anything. So, and that's an important part of it. Like I lived in a crappy apartment. I had isolated myself from any friends. Family would have been there to help in an instance if I'd ever mentioned it or asked for it, but I just didn't. So I got off work that day, cashed my check, went to the off sale, which is about a 10-minute walk away from my place. I didn't have a car either. And I bought enough 26s from that off sale to fill 2 bags, so I could carry them home. Carried them home, got them home, set them on the kitchen table, and went back out because there was a liquor board store right across the street from that off sale. And I walked to the liquor board store and I did the same thing. Came home and then started on what my mission for that weekend was going to be. I just started drinking and passing out and coming to, getting pissed off about it, and drinking some more. And that happened in several cycles throughout the weekend.
Mm-hmm. You doing all right?
I'm doing all right. Yeah. So Sunday night rolls around and I'm due at work on Monday morning. I still have some booze left that I had no intention of going into work one way or the other. I just tried to polish off as much as I could and just kind of make my final push, and passed out again. Woke up on Monday morning after I should have been at work. So I had a message from my boss at the time and a message from a real good friend of mine who also worked there, just asking where I was, if I'm okay. I think that was about it. It was about 8:30 or 9 a.m. because I remember looking for some booze at that point again, and remembering I was out, and the off sale didn't open until 10, and that was the longest 90 minutes. And all I did was watch the clock till it was like 10 minutes to 10, so I could time my walk, so I could be at the off sale when it opened on Monday morning. And again, filled the bags and walked home. And spent the last of my money doing that. So I spent Monday then trying to do the same thing, and I just kept waking up. I assume because with the amount of alcohol I was putting in me, it should have killed me. I think I was probably expunging a lot of it as that was happening. That's the only explanation I have as to why it didn't take me out. So again, a couple more cycles of that. And then Tuesday morning I wake up and no more booze and no more money, but I didn't accomplish my goal for the weekend. So at that point, I started thinking about what I was going to do next. And at some point shortly after, I ended up running myself a bath and sitting in that bathtub. And I had a razor blade. And I don't remember a whole lot of this after that. I do remember not really being able to get a super good grip because I was so alcohol poisoned by that point. I remember it kept falling out of my hands into the tub and reaching for it. I remember, and I just and thankfully I was like that, right? Because for whatever reason I couldn't get into my skin deep enough. Right? I bled a lot. The bathtub had red rings on it, and so it looked ugly, but it it wasn't enough to take me out, fortunately. And then the next day, I was still alive, but I just, like, could barely move. But I was, and getting more messages from my work buddy, and then early that Wednesday morning, I heard a tap at the window, and for whatever reason, I didn't ignore it. I don't know whether that tap at the window happened on Tuesday or Monday too, and I just didn't hear it or ignored it. But for whatever reason, when it happened on Wednesday, I went up and went to the window and opened it, and it was my friend from work, and just kind of signaling.
And he was your boss, right?
He was my boss for a time at work. He wasn't my boss at the time this happened, but he was for a spell. But I mean, he's a really great buddy and a really great guy outside of work too. So and he didn't know the whole story of where I was at life, but he knew enough of it to know that someone probably needed to check on me, and thankfully he did. So I let him in, and he saw the state I was in and saw my wrists, and said, we got to call the emergency room. We got to call your dad. And that's what we did. And I went to the emergency room at the General in Regina, and they ran some tests on me. And asked me if I would be okay with being admitted. They wanted to admit me into the psychiatric ward, and I consented to that. And so I began a 13-day stay on Ward 1D West in the General.
And did your company accommodate you?
Yeah.
How did they do that?
Yeah. So I mean, like my group insurance through work, it paid for my time off, both the time I was in the hospital, and then after I got out of the hospital, I got a month off for a stress leave, and so I still was able to collect, income to pay my bills, and so and then once that was done, I had a job to come back to, and a different job to come back to. So one that was maybe less challenging, less stressful, one that I liked a little bit better. So I can't say anything bad about.
We've got a question coming in here. What kind of work were you doing at that time?
So I did. It was a call center gig, which is not the most pleasant work. If you have anyone who's done it will know you're just kind of a professional abuse taker all day. So when you already have depression and anxiety issues that are undiagnosed because you refuse to accept that it's a real problem, right? Mm-hmm. It can wear you down, and I didn't. And my way of dealing with it was the same way I dealt with every stress in life. Get hammered. Right.
So your visit to the hospital, and that wasn't the end of your drinking.
Wasn't the end. So it was a temporary end of my drinking. Like I say, that was where I at least could finally now acknowledge, depression, real thing. Let's see what I can do. Let's actually try and get help for that. So they wanted to put me on some medication, and I started some medication. Took a couple core mental health courses, attended an AA meeting, just one. So, and it was good and bad that I accepted that depression thing as real, because if I hadn't, I might have had to admit that it was the alcohol that was the real big thing, the real big issue in my life, right?
Yeah. Heaven forbid.
That's the last thing an addict wants to blame any of their problems on, is what they're addicted to, right? Mm-hmm. So when I got told I had depression, I was like, it's not the drinking, it's the depression. I was just drinking I was just self-medicating. So now I'm going to get real meds. And, but what I did do, because I mean, I still understood that it was alcohol that ultimately put me in the hospital, is I decided I was going to stay sober for a year. Which again, in retrospect, I almost intentionally killed myself with alcohol, and I still could only say, I'll give myself a year, right? I should have been able to say that's it, right? But no, I said, I'll give myself a year of being sober. It's the least I can do for, you know, everyone that's now come to help me, right? My family rallied around me, my friends rallied around me, work, right? So like, this is the least I can do for, and the health system, right? Least I can do for these people that
So
are the reason.
So the people at your work and everybody, they were big supporters for you during this time.
Well, I mean, yeah, the friends I had at work, yeah, and I mean, people understood. People saw what I'd been hiding, right? So up until that point, a lot of people knew a lot of people would have said, yeah, he's not in a good way, but I don't think anyone really knew how severe it was until that incident. So I said I was going to come out of the hospital and be sober for a year, and I was, and it was a great year. I started a new band within a couple months of being out of the hospital. Was doing a lot better at work. Didn't miss another day of work through that year, and started, actually, I think for the first time in my adult life, got myself a bank account, things like that. So it was a good year. And then about a week after that year expired, I was like, well, okay, it's obviously not the alcohol, because I wouldn't have lasted a year if it was the alcohol. So I had a couple beer, again, at a show that I was playing. And that was it. I had 2 beer and woke up the next day feeling great and thought, okay, I can drink now. So that 2 beer that one weekend turned into 4 the weekend after, and within pretty short order, I'm again, back to hiding 26s in the bathroom so I can, chug in the shower, and so no one knows, right? It's remarkable how fast, again, that happened after I just started dabbling, and I never got back into drugs, though. I just stuck with the booze that time. But then drinking became a part of my life again, all the way up through till the end of 2013, basically.
So what was the final straw for you? Like, what finally happened? What could have possibly been worse?
So nothing was worse than ending up in the hospital. What finally caused me to stop? So Boxing Day of 2013, it started off so innocently. A friend asked me if I wanted to go out for a couple beers in the afternoon. That had always been somewhat of a Boxing Day tradition for us. So I went out for a couple pints at a local pub, stayed for a couple more. Other people started showing up. Other people with involved in more than just alcohol started showing up. And then it became, hey, let's go back to my buddy's place. He's having a party. And if I had been not drunk by that time, I would have known what that meant. I knew the buddy, I knew the name, I knew exactly what was going to be in that house, and I went anyways. And I fell off every possible wagon I was ever on in one night, that night. But it all started just with a couple beers, like it always had, right? Every really dark story I have in life starts with I just had a couple beers, and so then and by the way, I was driving from place to place that night, right? Like just absolute idiocy. I woke up the next day, kind of pieced together what had happened. You're sort of foggy and you're trying to kind of place yourself, and that was the day. So December 27th, 2013, I went to our washroom and looked in the mirror, and I said out loud, I said, the alcohol is the problem, and I can't have it anymore under any circumstances. And it was the first time in my life I'd ever said that. I'd always found something else to blame. But I had the epiphany that if I eliminate this one thing, everything else gets eliminated too. And that was both inspiring for myself and terrifying for myself, because on one hand, it's, I just have this one thing. If I can take care of this one thing, everything else is going to fall into place. And that is exactly what has happened since. But the one thing I wanted to give up was the thing that I had trained my brain to need the most. So that was scary as hell. And I I didn't know at the time that I would be sitting here now, 7.25 years, 100% alcohol free and cigarette free and cocaine free and ecstasy free. And thank you.
We're really glad you're here too, man.
I'm really glad I'm here too, man. And what a 7.25 years it's been since.
So what did you change? Like what did you change that was just one day you're like, and everything was different?
So what I changed is I was able to, I understood the enemy, right? I was able to identify the enemy beforehand. Like even with my hospital stay, I came out of that hospital stay and said, well, the enemy is depression, so I'm going to fight depression. And I did, right? But because I didn't identify alcohol as the enemy at that time, I let it back into my life. So because on December 27th, 2013, I was able to say the alcohol is the problem. It's the enemy. I was able to focus my energies and my attention on alcohol addiction specific resources, alcohol addiction specific counseling, alcohol addiction specific reading, and from there, everything just really fell into place.
Did you find the book? The book?
I found the book. So one of the first books I picked up in really early 2014 is this one. It's called Super Brain.
Uh-huh.
And it's by Deepak Chopra, his pretty famous name, and another fellow named Rudolph Tanzi, who is a neurologist and a Harvard professor. So it's written half from Deepak's spiritual perspective and half from Rudolph Tanzi's scientific perspective. And there's a chapter in there specific to addiction, and I can't tell you the amount of times in my life since that I've read that exact chapter. I read the whole book at least once a year, but I read that chapter once every 3 months. And that book taught me so much about how to properly relate to my own brain, and to how to use my brain for positive things instead of letting my brain control me. I can control my brain now. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think of at least a passage or two from that book. Mm-hmm. So pretty good find, pretty good chapters around that was that day.
Yeah. Oh, and there's 1,000 roads to recovery, man.
And there is, and everyone has their own, right? And I've recommended this book to everyone, and with varying, some people say it didn't really teach me anything. I don't know really what you got out of that, but and some people really enjoyed it for entertainment value. But everyone has their own combination, right?
So then what happened? You you get the help, you get to know yourself, you do some readings, you find a new way to live, a new way to think.
Yeah.
So then what do you do now?
What do I do now? So, I mean, number one, this is weird how this happens, but as soon as I stopped drinking entirely, my bank account started going in the right direction for the first time in my life. Praise.
I don't know. How did that happen?
And like I've tried to work it out, and like, and I was, I was spending at my worst like anywhere between $300 and $500 a week on booze without going out, like without paying $6 or $7 at a club. Like this is just private usage, right? So that adds up quick when you're not spending it on anything. You just watch it kind of build up in your bank account, and in pretty short order after that, I landed myself an excellent job, new job. And so what I did with that money is I just started traveling, and in the past, like since 2014, the list of places I've got to see is ridiculous, and at the same time also rejuvenating my music career back to a point that was way beyond where it ever even was before all this happened. Like I have 6 different projects I perform with now, and I play basically up until the pandemic hit anyway, pretty much every weekend and during the week a lot as well, and which again also doesn't hurt the bottom line and gives me the ability to travel and see some places.
So now you've found this new way to live, and what do you do now when your thoughts start to go sideways? I know myself as a person in recovery, not every day is flowers, and some days it's
That's
a shit
right.
day just because it's a shit day.
That's right.
What do you do?
Well, so what I did, like these adventures I go on, that's my reward system to myself, right? And I always made sure I had a trip booked. So, I wouldn't get home from a trip without another one having already been booked. So I always had that to look forward to. And always have my gigs to look forward to. And I reminded myself every day, one sip of alcohol and no more gigs, no more trips. And that got me through just about anything. And I find the hard days are really just days, right? So as a user, it was hard weeks and hard months and hard years. As a sober person, yeah, I might have the odd hard day or maybe 2, but I know there's better days ahead, and I always had that carrot too, that the momentum of good decisions, I call it, where as long as you keep making the right calls, good things are going to keep happening to you, and that worked really well up until about March of last year.
Yeah, well, I think everybody went a little sideways March of last year. So.
And my first thought when all of that started happening is, okay, it's time to really protect it. Like my sobriety is among the most precious things in my world, right? It's a Fabergé egg to me. I had the foresight to know that there was going to be a lot of rough days when that happened, right? Because honestly, the dominant thought in March of 2020 was, why did I bother? Right? I do all this work to get my life back on track, to, get my music career rejuvenated, have the ability to travel, which I'd been dreaming about since I was little. And then that all got taken away through no fault of my own. Right. And everyone in the world went through the same thing. But for me, it was those thoughts of why did I even bother really scared me, because I'm like, that's the first step to a possible slip. Now that ended up not happening. The love and support of a good woman sure helped that. And I still had my great day job, right? I mean, I came out of it better than a lot of folks did, and I understand that. So I don't want to feel sorry for myself, but a lot of what was working to keep me sober was suddenly gone. Mm-hmm. Now, within a couple months of that, I ended up starting to make a record. So I was able to have an outlet for that side of me, and that record just became my obsession and my focus until the day it came out yesterday.
Yes.
So, yeah. So is that okay? Can I?
Well, I've been plugging it on the page all week, and I'm giving away 3 copies tonight.
And I appreciate that, and I really appreciate that. Yeah. So big up to my buddy Kyle on that. I went over to his place one night. We just wanted to get together, and we're singing some Elvis Costello songs. And right before I left, he said, "Do you have any songs you want to record?" He has a great studio in his basement. And I said, yeah, I could throw something together. And what that became was my very first solo album, proper. So yeah. And then that project undoubtedly helped more than I can properly express. So,
yeah. So, have you found yourself helping a lot of people with struggles and addiction? Do you talk recovery a lot?
Sometimes I think I talk about it a lot. Sometimes I think I don't talk about it enough. And I've heard both, right? I have people reach out to me saying you should be doing more. But I've also heard that, some people think you talk about it too much, right? You're never going to keep everyone happy. So you just got to do what you got to do. Every time I do talk about it, I always say, if you think you need to talk to someone, then you do need to talk to someone. And if I am that first person you talk to, you know where to find me. And yeah, lots of people have taken me up on that. With either just a Facebook message or a text if they have my number. Yeah. How much help I actually am, I don't know, because I tell them, I tell them what worked for me, or I'll give them some resources. But ultimately, what exactly worked for me is not going to exactly work for everyone else. So
yeah, and that's important to recognize.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, man. Well, I'm not quite done with the questions yet.
Okay.
But I do have a surprise.
Oh.
We are going to listen to one of Chris's brand new songs.
Oh.
It's called Buddy.
Ooh.
And we are going to see a little bit about what Chris has been up to in this wonderful life he's built in recovery.
Awesome. That's cool.
So,
awesome.
Chris, don't leave. Nobody leave. Sit back. Enjoy the show. Here we go.